Hi, today I'm gonna be doing something I've never actually done before, which is a film review. Because people who know me would know, much to their disappointment, that I don't really watch a lot of movies. But this time I'm doing a review, and it isn't actually of a movie, strictly speaking. It's about a documentary. This documentary is called Propaganda. It was produced in North Korea, probably quite recently, and somehow snuck out of the country apparently. So it's originally meant to be targeting their own people, for their own people to watch, to learn about the outside world as an educational tool. But the person who smuggled it out, well, and some other people have been starting to question this and thinking whether it was actually meant to be smuggled out to teach people in the developed world mostly about what their opinion is and to think about the society that they live in. So, what do I think of it in the end? Um, I'll start off by saying that I think it dissects the flaws of the Western model of capitalism quite well, right? And it presents them out into the public like airing dirty laundry. However, this, coming from North Korea, is also hypocritical in its own ways. So, firstly, it's quite ironic that this documentary is called Propaganda, and it targets the West, even though it doesn't address the North Korean brand of propaganda itself. So, for example, it picks on the human rights atrocities going on in the West, especially, but it does not mention anything about its own human rights atrocities. It also demonizes celebrities in the media as being a bit of a cult figure, but they don't take into account that their entire country was actually built on one cult leader after the next. So, also another thing that I found out is that it seems to be targeted at some countries. It's very selective, mainly its main enemies, United States, Britain, Australia, and Japan. So, one example of how I came to this conclusion is that in one section it discredits religion, which is fair enough because I mean, Karl Marx once described religion as what's it, the opium of the masses or something along those lines. However, in this particular documentary, it seems to target Christianity and Judaism quite a lot in terms of its images and what its content addresses. It doesn't really touch on like Islam, Buddhism, or Hinduism. So, in that sense, it's already a form of favoritism. You can actually tell that it's very targeted. However, it does make some good points. So, I've started by addressing the my critiques of this documentary, and then I'll also talk about its positive points. So, with its positive point, it makes some good points. For example, in the Western world, advertisement is usually used as a form of a bait. It makes people feel deficient and also makes people equate material wealth with success in a form of needing to feel superior. And this actually makes sense because, after all, the Western model of capitalism in the first place is based on competition at all levels. So, personally, if you think about your own life and who the people you admire are, I'm not going to use the word idols because you might not idolize them, but people whom you admire, I'm sure a lot of you would not be thinking about humanitarian people like Gandhi, but rather would aspire to be, say, millionaires or billionaires, Bill Gates, etc., because of the fact that they're seen as success stories. So, this has been addressed in this particular documentary. So, it is quite thought provoking and very confrontational, and it probably will upset a lot of us because we do live in this society. In some sense, we think about it that way. And this documentary also puts some things in context. For example, the American war on terror. They have said that there are about 3,000 deaths in the United States from terrorism in the last decade, which would be probably from the 911 incident over a decade ago. However, putting it into context, it's far less than cancer-related deaths, obesity, cigarette smoking, even passive smoking, which the film actually describes as kind of the government killing their own people. So putting things into context, um, the so-called terrorism is trivialized in this sense. So another thing which they pointed out is that the United States has used nuclear weapons in real life before, in World War II particularly, and North Korea hasn't. But in the media, North Korea is the country that's reported to be, erratic and unpredictable and the axis of evil, even though they're not the ones who have used nuclear weapons before. Right? Bit of an extreme example, extremely controversial as well. And also, I think this film appeals to the more left-wing side of us, but in some sense it's hypocritical. So, for example, right, the issue of racism, very controversial. Um, the film mentions that in especially the United States and in Australia, there were invasions in the form of colonialism in the past, and so that implies the racism. And I guess that the documentary didn't really address their own country's mindset on that because their long-standing thinking is that their North Koreans are the superior race and everyone else is inferior to them. So in a sense, it's hypocritical, and also it tries to appeal to animal rights slightly. For example, they try to say that in the fashion industry in the West, a lot of fur coats are done at the expense of animals, which is true. No, we can't deny that. However, in their country themselves, what have they done for animal rights? If you think about it, right? So in a way, it's trying to expose the frailties of other countries without examining its own, and also it appeals a little bit to feminism. It mentions that 9 out of 10 women in the West are unhappy with their body image, and that's due to advertising and what the media sort of puts in our minds about the ideas of beauties and things, which is true, right? So in that sense, it's useful. So I think I've ranted on enough about it. If you are curious about this particular documentary, I will put the link down below and you can watch it and you can judge for yourself. It's extremely thought-provoking. Some of the points they make are very, very good. Some are a bit hypocritical and some will possibly make you angry. So I hope this has helped you and have a good time watching the film.